All right, here we are. Another lovely day, another set of lovely reviews. We have rotation number 18 kicking us off. Huge, massive pick. We have Lateralus by Tool. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. This is Nick. Nick sent this one in. Thanks, Nick. I introduced Nick to Tool. I'm really happy that you like Tool as much as I do, Nick. And this was just an incredibly formative album for me. I discovered Tool in high school. I became very insufferable about them, which is annoying, but to some extent I think is justified when we're talking about Tool. The instrumental depth and intricacy, the lyricism, it all just comes together to form such a unique and beautiful product. It really, to me, I feel a little spoiled when it comes to metal, with Tool being one of the first metal bands I really got into, because there's just nothing like them, really, in terms of how intricate everything they make is. The level of complexity and detail that goes into every track is just unrivaled. And of their albums, I think Lateralus is their best. The way I like to think about it is I prefer treating it like a concept album, in that it really explores a relationship with God and a relationship with religion, which, looking into it deeper, and the lead singer, Maynard Keynes, looking into his relationship with religion and his upbringing, it makes a lot of sense that there would be some rage and resentment there, but also a desperate questioning. And I really love this album. I was an edgy atheist in high school, and this album was really formative to that, and to this day is quite formative on how I feel about religious institutions and how I feel about the idea of God, or at the very least the idea of a personal God and of personal enlightenment. So just for all of that, I have so much to say about this album. The tracks are beautiful. You can rearrange them in order of the Fibonacci sequence, and it forms a different album that is equally cohesive and compelling. There's just so much you can do with it, and I love it. If I wanted to, I could probably recite the entire album off the top of my head. I definitely have the full album memorized. It's amazing. One of my favorites. I think I'm comfortable in calling it the most important album in my life, just in terms of the music I've come to appreciate and listen to. So I don't think it's a question. I don't think anyone can sway me on it. Lateralus, it's a 10 out of 10. It's a masterpiece, and very, very few albums come close to achieving what Lateralus was able to achieve, at least to me. Next up, we got A Moment Apart by Odessa from Chai. And this was, it was good. I mean, I thought it was well executed, and, it did what it was setting out to do. But at least in my layman's perspective, it was really lacking in personality. I don't know that I heard much that, if you put this on in a playlist with a bunch of other EDM, I don't know that I could pick out the Odessa tracks, or at least the tracks off of this album. They were good, they were, fine, but they weren't distinct. There wasn't a lot of individuality about them. And so, I'm going to hold that against it to some extent. When I compare this in my head, the thing that pops into my mind is Worlds by Porter Robinson. And that album did have a ton of personality, a ton of individuality just dripping out of it. I could really tell the artist's touch, whereas this, I don't know, felt a little bit mass-produced, and that might be an insult, and I'm sorry. But, it just didn't stand out from its peers. I still enjoyed it well enough. I just didn't find it super noteworthy or groundbreaking, or didn't stand on its own, I feel like. So I think a 6.5 out of 10 is what I'm comfortable giving it. Next up, we got You Will Never Know Why by Sweet Trip from Evan. And I did like this more than the other Sweet Trip entry we got. I still significantly prefer Velocity Design Comfort. I might be a little bit of a normie in that aspect. because You Will Never Know Why, just like Tiny Houses and Secret Speeches, it lacked that original Sweet Trip glitchiness that I came to know and love from Velocity Design Comfort. But I think I was more comfortable with this outing. I felt like it was more cohesive, and while I feel like the glitchiness still wasn't present, at least in most of the album, for what it was, I thought it was more cohesive, but overall just more pleasant, you know? It's almost if you didn't tell me this was Sweet Trip, I would have really enjoyed it. I would have thought, okay, this is a nice, gentle, saccharine, almost bubblegummy pop kind of thing. A nice little outing, nice relaxing summer music. But it's Sweet Trip, and I do expect a little bit of experimentality from them, and I didn't get that here either, but I prefer it to Tiny Houses. So, You Will Never Know Why. I think I wrote 7. I'm second guessing myself. I'm going to give it a 7.5 because I did really like it, and I'm going to pretend that it's not a Sweet Trip album. I'm going to just take it on its own without the context of their other releases. So, 7.5 out of 10. Next up, we have Tabua de Esmeralda by George Benjor. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This one's from Xavier. I know it's Brazilian, so I don't know if it's like Jorge Benjor or something like that, but I'm just going to say George Benjor. This was fun. It was nice, fun, well made, well presented, had some grooves to it, and I felt like it was absolutely drenched in personality. There was so much passion and fun that you could just visibly, or I guess audibly, hear throughout the entire track, or not track, the entire album. You know, he's having a good time with it. I did appreciate the references to like mysticism, specifically Hermeticism, even though I don't speak Portuguese, so I don't really know what the references were talking about, but I definitely heard some like keywords in there. And you know, I just thought that it was fun. Weirdly enough, I think the closest thing that it reminded me to were the Rainbow Goblins by Masayoshi Takanaka, in just that it still had that fun, really personal vibe. You know, I feel like, and I mean this as a compliment, honestly, I feel like this was an album made for nobody. This was an album made explicitly for George Benjor, just a passion project, something that he did for fun with his friends, and it works. It really does. You know, it feels like no one specific was in mind for like the target audience, and this was just something that he wanted to make for the sake of making it. And I appreciated that. I thought it was fun, thought it was nice, more than what I expected, especially considering my contentious views of a lot of Latin music. A lot of those motifs and themes just don't really do it for me, but here, I thought it was presented nicely, presented well, and I feel like it avoided a lot of the cliches that I take issue with when it comes to Latin music. I don't even know if this qualifies as Latin. It might be Latin folk, bossa nova, something or another. I don't want to say exactly. I don't want to like put it out there and be wrong. But whatever it is, I liked it, and I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Next up, we have Phaedra by Tangerine Dream from Brendan. And for what it was good. I understand that this was really early electronic, but you know, it's hard in the modern context to, I guess, move past how primitive it sounds. Knowing just how many more tools and options are available nowadays kind of makes it hard for me to appreciate this album within the contexts. I appreciate that, you know, for the time it released, I think this was 1974, yeah, this absolutely had to be ground shattering, you know, like nothing like this before it. And I can understand that, but I feel like while it had a lot of depth and texture, it just was missing in like the dynamism of more contemporary electronic work, especially more contemporary ambient music. I don't even know if this technically qualifies as ambient. I feel like I'm leaning towards that label just because of how simple the instruments were on it. But, it definitely had more energy and more of a groove than most ambient today does, or most ambient in general does. It was imposing and foreboding, but at the same time it was pretty peaceful and pretty serene, and I kind of liked how it was able to juggle both of those feelings. But overall, I don't know how much more Tangerine Dream I'm going to explore, simply because I know that there are a lot of more contemporary artists whom I prefer to this. So I'm thinking a 6.5 out of 10. Respect for what it did. It's not bad. I just feel like it's hard for me to get away from how primitive it is. All right, next up we have Slide by George Clanton from Hunter, and this is another album that I love. I was really close to actually putting this on my list, so I'm very appreciative to you, Hunter, for including it in yours. This is the best Vaporwave album. If you're willing to stretch the definition and include this under Vaporwave, nothing compares. George Clanton, before he released this album, was releasing more traditional Vaporwave work under Esprit Fantasy. And in terms of the meme scene of Vaporwave, Esprit Fantasy was pretty huge in it. But what he did to develop that sound, make it more full, depth, deep, and complex, it was incredible work. Every track off of this album gives me goosebumps. It's beautiful, so well made, so layered and textured, and you get lost in that ethereal ooze of instruments. And then you add George's vocals on that. He has a pretty solid singing voice, and the lyrics are pretty emotional. They're very personal to George, and I just really love it. I love how it all came together. Doesn't hurt that he is pretty self-aware of himself as a meme, at least in some circles. And while he doesn't make fun of that on this album, I do want to shout that out, that I think he's a cool dude, and his at least online personality and his online presence is fun, is neat. But I think one thing I should say, I do need to listen to his other work. Slide is the only full album from George Clanton I've listened to, and I really want to believe that his later works at least improve on it to whatever extent it can be improved on. Slide is just such an amazing album, in my opinion. Let's see, what else here? What else did I write down? That's about it. Slide by George Clanton. I think it's just shy of a 10. And since I'm only doing half points, it's going to get a 9.5 out of 10. But I want you to understand, it is the highest 9.5 I can give. It's just shy of a 10. I love this album. It's amazing. Moving on, we got Etazhi by Molchat Doma from Dom. And obviously I'd heard the meme song off of this. I do not know how to pronounce any of the tracks. I don't read Cyrillic. But if you know, you know. I thought it was good. It had a dim, but I guess relaxing atmosphere, if that makes sense. There weren't any moments on it I felt were too intense. And it was a really murky album, very sludgy in that sense. Not sludgy in terms of sludge metal, but in terms of this synth pop sludge. It's dark synth pop, I guess, is a good way to describe it for me. It's exceptionally post-Soviet. Just that, Chai will have some contentious opinions here, but if you take the Western conception of the post-Soviet bloc, especially 90s Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, this is absolutely that music. You're in a dingy nightclub. Literally everything smells of the shittiest cigarettes in the world, and you can buy I don't know, you can buy a shitty malt liquor for a nickel. That's the vibe. You're getting fucked up on the shittiest liquor possible because nothing matters. You have no job, and the economic situation of your country is in absolute shambles. Very tonally cohesive album, very groovable. Even though I don't know what the hell they're saying, there was still a lot of emotion packed into that. And so, yeah, Etazhi, I think Dom said it means stairs. I also think Dom said that this is a Belarusian group. Etazhi, 7.5 out of 10. I liked it. I thought it was good. Definitely a really unique vibe. Not a lot of albums really strike that chord. All right, we got my album. We got How to Leave Town by Car Seat Headrest. I found this album last year, and the fact that I found this album is actually one of the reasons I decided to try to start Music Club, because I was like, how can I trick people into listening to this? Now, I've already gone into depth about how much I love Car Seat Headrest as a band. And the reason I hadn't checked this album out sooner is because I knew that there was a big tonal shift between their studio albums and Will Toledo's solo projects. But after someone on YouTube I watch who is also a huge Car Seat Headrest fan said that this was their favorite, I thought I would check it out, and I get it. I still think I prefer Twin Fantasy to How to Leave Town, but it's really close. In terms of a solo project, this is, in my opinion, the most impressive solo project I've ever heard. And that even includes like solo studio works, people who have studio equipment. This is Will still in his bedroom, still with, instruments and household recording systems. And he's able to make something that sounds this good and this interesting. He's able to craft the lyrics this well and this poignantly. It's just incredible. It's so nuanced. It's so personal. It's so good throughout. Oh my God. At the end of the year, my Spotify Wrapped is probably going to be fucked up for Music Club. But if it wasn't, I bet you at least 2 or 3 songs off of this album would make it onto like my top 5 for the year. I have been so in love with this album since I heard it. I just wanted to espouse how great I think this album is, how incredible it is that it's a solo work, and yeah, just so much about this album to love. So easy 10 out of 10 for me on How to Leave Town. Next up, we got American Idiot by Green Day. This one's Jude. This was our 4th of July pick, appropriately. And, it's a classic album. I'm not the biggest pop punk or, I guess, maybe early alt-rock fan. I don't know if this is technically pop punk or what. I feel like that's the most appropriate genre in my uneducated opinion. But, it's good. A lot of iconic tracks on here. Not gonna lie, not the biggest fan of American Idiot, but like Jesus of Suburbia, great track. Holiday, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, both of those great tracks. It just it really set a precedent for what pop punk was going to become throughout the 90s and early 2000s. A lot of bands that are really popular today probably not be here if it weren't for this album, if it weren't for Green Day more generally. I'm still not the biggest pop punk fan, but credit where credit's due. Absolutely respect where respect is due. It's good. Better than I anticipated, I'll say that. Because in terms of Green Day, I feel like they can get a bit grating at times. I feel like with a lot of pop punk, they can get kind of whiny at times. But I feel like Green Day does keep a lid on that for the most part. I feel like, they do venture into that territory sometimes, but for the most part, I think that they keep it pretty subdued, pretty relaxed, and pretty level throughout. So, better than I thought it would be. I think Dookie is a better Green Day album, sue me. But, yeah, American Idiot, I think it's 7 out of 10. I think that's pretty fair, at least for me. Next up, we got Dots and Loops by Stereolab. This is from a miscellaneous submission. I thought it was lovely. It was aggressively French, though, which, isn't necessarily bad when it comes to music, because, there's a few French groups and a few French albums that I do really like. I don't even know if Stereolab are French, but the album just felt really, really French. I don't know. It sounded like Future, not like cyberpunk future, but like I guess 1950 retro futuristic French cafe music. If that's worth anything, if that means anything to you. And I liked it. It was chill, jazzy, relaxing, engaging, interesting, funky. A nice calm funk, not a demanding funk, not a get up and dance funk, but a hey, welcome to the cafe. Here is your cigarette and the croissant. Please bob your head. Yeah, that kind of vibe. Let's see. I thought the composition was interesting throughout. A lot of interesting choices that were done quite well throughout the entire album. And, a lot of the tracks were on the more ethereal side, which, if you've watched my last 3 reviews, I'm pretty happy about that. I do like the ethereal sounds. And so, overall, I don't really know what I was expecting coming into this, other than it's an electronic album. But, I feel like the closest thing I can compare it to in my head is maybe Fortet. And I like Fortet. So, Thoughts in Loop by Stereolab. I'm going to give it 8.5 out of 10. I enjoyed. Alright, last up. We got World Class by Luxury Elite. This one's from Kyle. And, this was a really unfortunate pairing. Because this, I think, is a fine Vaporwave album. But it's unremarkable. At times, it even borders on barber beats, which, if you don't know, is pretty much just taking old songs and just pitch shifting them down and slowing them down. In certain music production circles, I've seen it being panned as the laziest genre to produce. And it did kind of feel like that. I feel like there was a lot of room to inject some personality, some individual decision making, some creativity, and it didn't. It was really comfortable just sitting in that kind of style, which isn't a bad thing. I know that's, some people love that, but when I say it was really unfortunate is because earlier in this rotation we had Slide, which is, for my money, the best Vaporwave album of all time. And when we have this coming up just a few days later, you can't help but compare it in your head to what you'd heard earlier. And Slide is just so filled with personality and, uniqueness, whereas this just kind of sounds generic. It sounds like something that was just kind of put out to be made. Make it for the hell of it. Make it in an afternoon, put it out there. I feel like there's undeniably some talent, from Luxury Elite in there, but I just didn't hear it come through. I didn't hear those moments of creativity, those touches of personality from them. And I was just hoping they would. I was hoping they'd throw something my way that I could latch onto. And I just never really got that. So, I don't know what to say. I think there was a lot of untapped potential. I feel like this could have been really interesting, really good. But, for what it is, it's fine. It's just unremarkable. And in comparison to other pieces of Vaporwave, it's ultimately a bit disappointing. So, World Class, Luxury Elite, it's a 4.5 out of 10. All right. I know I've been pumping these out one a day for this week. I'm going on a short trip next 2 days, so just don't get used to it. You'll get the next review when you can. Don't get greedy. All right. Love you. Bye.